Okay, welcome to episode 23 of the Edgar Rice Burroughs podcast, where we celebrate the work of the greatest storyteller of the 20th century by talking about and analyzing his novels. Um, my name is Tim DeForest. I am the author of several books about what I call pre-digital pop culture, about things like old-time radio, pulp magazines, newspaper comic strips, and such. Um, and I keep a blog about such things at comics, old time radio, and other cool stuff. And I'm being joined tonight by Jess and Scott. Jess, thanks for being here.
Well, you're certainly welcome. Always my pleasure. Enjoy these discussions and sessions that we have. You all will find me at the Facebook discussion group, The Love of All Things Edgar Rice Burroughs, where we are talking Burroughs pert near 24/7. Love to have you join us on Facebook, The Love of All Things Edgar Rice Burroughs. Let me also note that I'm an advanced reader for ERB Inc., but any opinions that I offer here in this discussion, or really any place, are my own opinions. All right, go ahead.
And I'm Scott Stewart. We had a lot of enjoyment working on the first part of The Eternal Savage, and looking forward to doing the second part tonight.
Yep, and we are talking about part two of The Eternal Savage, which was published. The second part was published in 1915 in All Starry magazine. It was serialized over 4 weeks in January and February of that year. So it is a sequel to The Eternal Lover, which was published in 1914 and which we discussed last week. This second half was originally titled Sweetheart Primeval, the reason for that title would become apparent as we're talking about the book. But they were combined into a book, first in 1925, and then reprinted, as all of Burroughs' books have been, numerous times through the years, including a ace paperback with an awesome cover by Frank Frazetta. I think I mentioned last time that is my single favorite image inspired by this novel, is the Frazetta cover. And last week we ended with Nu, the caveman who had been in suspended animation for 100,000 years, and Victoria, who was the reincarnation of his girlfriend Nat Ul from ancient times, were going off into the jungle together. And we're going to be picking up right there. With part two, chapter one of The Eternal Savage, where Victoria is going into the jungle. She knows that her brother Barney is going to be following them, and she's still undecided whether to return to civilization or to follow Nu, her love, into the jungle. Nu takes her back to the cave of O, or Oo, or Oo, that's spelled O-O. It is the name of the saber-toothed tiger. Their name for the saber-toothed tiger that was one of the most dangerous beasts that existed in their time 100,000 years ago. And that he figures this is a good starting point to search for his tribe. He still really can't get the idea that his tribe existed 100,000 years ago through his head. So they travel together for 3 days to get back to this cave, and they are in the cave when that night an earthquake strikes again. So as with part one, part two begins with an earthquake at the end of the first chapter. The Nu is knocked senseless and buried in the cave, and that is the end of the first chapter. I presume, actually, wish I'd thought to look this up. I'm presuming that when this was published, about 10 months after part one, there was probably a little bit of a summary to remind readers of who these characters were and what their situation was before it dived into the story itself. Perhaps a summary written by the magazine's editor or something, because it does pick up with the presumption that the readers know what's going on. Any comments about chapter one from you guys?
No.
Okay. And
Well, to address your point about some bringing the reader up to date on prior information from the first part. I think that's a very good part, a very good point. Although I don't have anything here to confirm that. I don't have the first edition. I don't have the pulp version either. So I would suspect that's the case, but I cannot confirm.
Yeah. So with chapter 2, we are suddenly back 100,000 years in time. With Nat Ull, who remember is Victoria's is Victoria before she reincarnated. Nat Ull has she lived 100,000 years ago, waking up in the cave with her family. You know, her father's name is Tha, her brother is At, and her mother is Lu Tan. And she remembers that she remembers everything that had happened to Victoria or would happen to Victoria 100,000 years ago. And when Nu wakes up, we're going to discover also, this will be next chapter, he's going to remember a lot of what happened in the future. And we'll talk about this more when we finish summarizing the novel, but there's obviously, weird time travel shenanigans going on here, whether it's the cave that's the source of that, or whether it is psychic emanations going back and forth between different reincarnated versions of people, or whatever's going on. They do remember what happened, but they just dismiss it as a weird dream. We get a little bit of Nat L's home life at the cave. We do know that Nu has gone off to hunt the saber-toothed tiger to prove that he's worthy of her because he wants to marry her. She wants to marry him too, but he had not. She had urged him to go on this hunt, not really thinking that he would. And now he's going to be she's going to be worried about his safety. And her father, in the meantime, it's gone to the chief and urged them to relocate the tribe because there have been some earth tremors, and they're now worried about whether this is a safe place to be. Various members of the tribe are arguing either for or against this. The chief is Nu's father, Nu the Elder, I guess is a good way to describe him. But he agrees to move the tribe, but not until his son comes back. In the meantime, another member of the tribe named Hud proposes to Nat L, and she spurns him. And because of this, Hud kidnaps Nat L and carries her to a deserted cave away from the tribe. And the chapter ends with him blocking the entrance to this cave and then going to take Nat L in his arms. So this kind of parallels the end of, I think, chapter 12 from part 1, where it ended with a villain kidnapping Victoria and then grabbing her just as the chapter ends. Now we have Hud kidnapping Nat L, who is effectively the same person as Victoria, and the chapter ends with him grabbing her. So no matter what era Nat L lives in, she's got nasty guys running after her. Any comments from you guys?
I think you summarized it very well, and drawing that parallel to prior events, I think is important. History has a way of repeating itself.
It does, doesn't it? And I will say that I do like the little bit of domestic stuff with the Nat Ull and her family going about their regular business of getting water or what have you at the beginning of the day. It just gives the whole tribe a solid sense of realism, that you can now think of these as real people in a real time and place because they're doing all the stuff that people have to do on a day-to-day basis in that situation. Chapter 3, the action switches back to Nu, who has been, he has been out hunting for the saber-toothed tiger, and he had in this reality or this time line or whatever, he hasn't found the saber-toothed tiger. Remember in chapter 1, when he was still in this time period, he had found and killed it. Here he hasn't found it yet, and he had hidden out in the cave while the earthquake was going on. He has to dig himself out, and he still waits for the saber-tooth to come back. He won't go back to his tribe without the head of Oo, the saber-tooth, for Nat Ul. And while he's waiting, his dad and Nat Ul's father Thaw arrive and tell Nu that the tribe is moving. So Nu says he'll wait a day to try and get the saber-tooth. And then he'll follow the others back to the cave and he'll trail them to wherever their new location is. So he continues to wait. Still, the saber-tooth doesn't come back. Towards the end of the day, Nu kills a cave bear. It just has, if he can't get a saber-tooth, at least he can get a cave bear. And he takes the bear's hide and a head to give this to Nat Ul. So he's basically thinking, I can't give my girlfriend the gift that she asked for, so maybe I can get her this slightly less cool thing, and that'll be good enough.
At least he's not.
At least he's not. I'm sorry, you faded out there for a moment, Jess.
At least he's not empty-handed.
Yeah, that's true. It's better than nothing. So if you can't get your girlfriend's flowers, at least buy her a candy bar. So he returns to the deserted cave, and he sleeps in his deserted village. The tribe has moved on by now. He sleeps in his old cave, and he's planning on tracking them in down the next day. But meanwhile, back in the cave where Hud has Nat Ul prisoner, he's taking in her arms, but she is very proactive, as the females in a Burroughs story often are. They often act with bravery. She stabs him and gets away. And she returns to the old village, and Nu and Nat Ul do not realize that they are sleeping just in caves just a little ways away from each other. They don't encounter each other at this time. So in the morning, Nu, not realizing he missed his chance to reconnect with Nat Ul, follows the tribe's trail to the north. Later, Nat Ul wakes up, but Nu's already gone. And she decides, because she didn't run into the tribe when she was coming back from the north, because they had taken a slightly different route, she quite reasonably assumes that they've gone south. And she's incorrect in this, but her reasoning from what information she has is not unreasonable. It's in no way it shows her to be stupid or thoughtless. She's thinking this out logically, but because she just doesn't have one bit of information that the tribe had taken a slightly different route than the one she would have expected, she makes the wrong assumption. I do like the way Burroughs sets that up. It doesn't make Nat Ul look dumb. It just has her making a perfectly understandable mistake when she marches off in the wrong direction. And I do kind of enjoy the irony of the two of them sleeping so close together without realizing the other was there.
Ships that pass at night.
Yes, that's true. Any comments from you guys about these chapters, about chapter 3?
The pacing for part 2, I thought, was much more relaxed. I mean, things are happening, keeps the interest, but it's that's the right word, more relaxed pacing than the first part of the story was.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's going to pick up really fast, but I think that's true. I think these not boring at all. Still a great story, but probably a little bit slower pace than the first part was at first. So, Chris, even within that context, Burroughs is doing some very effective world building here. He presents this tribe in a very believable and logical way very quickly. So he doesn't waste a lot of time in that. Chapter 4, the boat builders. Nat Ul's, remember, she's going south. She's going in the wrong direction to reconnect with her tribe. And she runs into a tribe who are constructing wooden shelters and making boats by burning out the insides of tree trunks. This is a completely new thing for her. Her people do not have boats, and they live in caves. They never build their own structures. So she's seeing something here that's completely different from anything else she's ever seen. She's hiding and watching them, but one of the boat builders, whose name is Tur, T-U-R, sees her, desires her, and runs after her. Then so we switch back at this point to New's point of view. So Burroughs, as he often so effectively does, leaves us with a cliffhanger regarding Nat All. She's being chased by another unwanted suitor. New has overtaken his tribe, and he finds out that Nat Al is missing. Another guy in the tribe who also who's jealous of New because New's generally a pretty awesome guy, says that Nat Al went willingly with HUD. But New knows this is a lie, backtracks them, finds HUD in a cave. HUD is dying, but he dies before he can tell New anything other than Nat Al is the one who stabbed him. New continues to backtrack. He picks up Nat Al's trail, and he follows it to the boat builder camp. Now he sees Nat Al's tracks, and he sees the tracks of Tour following her, and he runs after them, only to have Nat Al's tracks suddenly disappear without explanation. And we find out how that happened pretty quickly, but as far as New is concerned, Nat Al just seems to have vanished while running away from somebody. So he sees Tour, the guy who'd been chasing Nat Al, although I don't know if New knows that at the time, launch a boat and paddle out towards the islands on the horizon. And he eavesdrops on the people. Apparently, whatever primitive language men are speaking, there's been no language drift yet. Even though these two tribes have not met each other before, they speak the same language. Just, I think, an indication that this is still very early in human history. And so, I'm getting a backtrack. Nope, it's going. Sorry about that. I was getting a reverberation of my voice there for a moment. I'm not sure why. So he eavesdrops, and he hears the other tribesmen saying that Tour is going after a beautiful woman who escaped him. So New presumes that this is Nat El, and as we'll see in the next chapter, he makes plans to pursue. Any comments from you guys from chapter 4?
Nothing for me.
Okay.
I like your summary, though. I think you did well.
Thank you. Chapter 5 is just a really cool action scene. So the men are going out fishing in these boats. One of the boats is destroyed by a sea monster, but New watches them as they fill another up with whatever smaller prey, whatever they're fishing for, and it returns. And as soon as New has a chance to get one of these boats, he charges into the camp, kills 3 of the tribesmen, and steals one of the boats. He quickly, he's a smart guy, New, for a primitive troglodyte, as Burroughs often describes him. He quickly figures out how to paddle, and he heads for the same island that Tour was going to. He has to kill a sea monster along the way, and he arrives at the island. He tracks Tour up a ravine, and the chapter ends when he hears a woman scream. So as I said, this chapter is a great action scene, both in New fighting the tribesmen and stealing a boat, and later killing the sea monster. The sea monster is not described in detail, but it is, I think, mentioned that it has a long neck. So I'm picturing plesiosaurs when he's fighting sea monsters in my mind. Were you guys picturing kind of the same thing, or?
Yeah, very similar. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And so we do see that in the Burroughs universe, dinosaurs or at least some dinosaur-like creatures still existed when man came on the scene. And since Burroughs' world is full of lost lands where dinosaurs do still live, this is a perfectly reasonable thing for him to do. I've always wondered if this story doesn't take place in the same universe as the movie 1 Million Years BC with Raquel Welch, where once again you had cave people encountering dinosaurs. So So any comments from you guys on chapter 5?
Well, I think you wrapped that pretty good, but I always enjoy the chapters where he brings in the prehistoric beasts.
Oh, everything's always better with dinosaurs. That's like a rule we should all live by. So,
Well, I'm pondering the possibilities of Raquel Welch being in this universe.
and then who's better looking, Raquel Welch or Nat L? Be endless
Victoria
debate about
Petrie and with dinosaurs.
that. So, so Jess, you were going to pick up with chapter 6.
Indeed, I am. And that's chapter 6. Now, we're in part 2 now. Chapter 6 there is entitled The Anthropoid Apes. We pick up the action with Tur, the boat builder, chasing Nat Ull. He hasn't heard about Raquel Welch. Trying to escape Tur, Nat Ull races down the beach when a pterodactyl seizes her. Now, we know this is an occupational hazard. We've seen pterodactyl snatching happen a couple times over in Palooster, and that usually does not end well. So Tur, who's there with his spear, launches a spear at the pterodactyl, catching it in the fatty portion of the long tail near the body. Sounds like a vulnerable spot. Even though wounded, the pterodactyl flies to the nearest island where her hungry hatchlings await their dinner. Nat Ull, who's hanging on, stops struggling because she knows even a cave bear or a bull boss is helpless in the talons of the pterodactyl. She's saving her energy. And besides, those pterodactyl claws are sharp. Don't want to get scratched up there any more than necessary. She sees that the pterodactyl is carrying her to a mysterious country out beyond the restless sea, someplace she's never been before. The pterodactyl drops Nat Ull in the nest with the little baby pterodactyls, then flies away. The baby pterodactyls attack, but Nat Ull wounds two, who then attack each other. These creatures aren't very smart. They are in turn attacked by a third baby pterodactyl, giving Nat Ull an opportunity to escape. She climbs down from the cliff, which is a slow, perilous descent, 100 feet down at least, and handholds are hard to come by, so you just take your time and hang on for dear life. Burroughs prose describes events here. So begin quote here. About her were the million sounds of the jungle. The lesser animals. Oh, okay. This is occurring after she's finally made it down to the ground level where she has some. She's on solid ground, firm footing, and she can catch her breath. So now she's taking a nap. Now I'm going to quote here from Burroughs. About her were the million sounds of the jungle, the lesser animals, the birds, the insects, the swaying branches. They but lulled her to deeper slumber. The winds, blowing up the ravine from the sea, fanned her cheek. It moved the soft, luxuriant hair that fell about her shoulders. It soothed and comforted her. But it did not whisper to her the close-set, wicked eyes that peered out of the trees upon her. So just escaped the pterodactyl nest. Now something else is going on. It did not warn Nat Ull of the drooling jaws, the pendulous lower lip, the hairy breast beneath which a savage heart beat faster as the little eyes feasted upon her farm. It did not tell her that a huge body had slipped from a nearby tree and was slinking toward her. It did not tell her, but a broken twig snapping beneath the wary foot of the stalker did alert her. End of that quote. So Nat Ull, all this is about 6 ape people. Nat Ull is awakened by the approach of 6 ape people who probably a little bit lower on the evolutionary scale than where she is. 6 ape people who chased her up the same cliff she had just come down. Just come down that cliff. Now I have to go back up, and in a hurry too. She took one look at these 6 ape people to see 6 great man-like forms, reddish hair all over the giant bodies. She saw wolf fangs, a hulking slouch, all upon short, crooked legs, not the kind of people you want to mess with after you've had a rough day. On the way up, Nat Ull manages to kill 2 of these 8 people by throwing rocks at them, knocking them off the side of the cliff. At the top of the cliff, Nat Ull slips, falling over the edge towards the rocky bottom below, seemingly destined to join those who just died landing there. On the way down, she knocks another one to his death. But all this serves to break her fall, enabling her to land on a very narrow ledge where she rolls further into the arms of one of her man-ape pursuers. After catching her, the man-ape races to the bottom of the cliff with his prize, pursued by the other two man-apes. So the race is on. Deciding to take a stand, Nat-Ul's captor throws her to the ground to attack, roaring and foaming, the other two man-apes. Nat-Ul takes this as an opportunity to leave. She wonders, how can a girl survive here with only a knife? She's rethinking this prehistoric lifestyle. Her conclusion was to press forward in a continuous battle for survival with wits and agility against brute force and cunning. That's her approach here. Nat-Ul makes her way through a gorge as the sounds of the battle grow distant behind her. Maybe she ducked that one. At the end of the narrow canyon, with the beach and the sea before her, Nat-Ul encounters a man. He grabs her as she passes. She fights like a tigress and screams. He laughs in her face. He is Tur the boat builder, and he has caught Nat-Ul. Now we understand why Tur was working so hard on his boat earlier. He heard about Nat-Ul, and he was trying to catch up to her about building a boat here real quick. Mm-hmm. That's the end of part 2, chapter 6. As we can see here, Nat-Ul encounters several dangers and threats, but proves to be a scrappy fighter, but we're still leaving her in a tough circumstance. That concludes chapter 6. Any comments?
Yeah, I agree. I agree about her being scrappy and brave, and I think so when she gets lucky with a knife thrust against the baby pterodactyls and gets them to start fighting each other, she's earned that luck just by the fact that she's fighting back the best she can. This chapter is it's one of my favorite ERB chapters. It's like a roller coaster of adventure writing. Pterodactyl nest, escaping from that, the climb down, the apes chasing her, the knocking them off a cliff, one of them catching her, them getting into a fight, her running away, getting caught by Tur. It's like one thing after another, just really fast paced, really exciting, great storytelling. It just is. If I had to pick the best chapter in this book, this would be it.
In fact, I was going to note that I've summarized and taken just the highlights here. There is a lot going on in this chapter. It's much more detailed than what I've led you all to believe. Burroughs' beautiful descriptions of all the anxiety, the excitement, the adventure, hanging onto the side of the cliff with by your fingertips, going down the cliff, back up the cliff. Mm-hmm. So if you only read one chapter out of this book, this might be the one to read. Although, of course, I recommend reading the entire book and look forward to this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments? Go ahead.
You mentioned that getting snatched by pterodactyls is a very common danger in Edgar Rice Burroughs' universe. And the specific instance I remember is Tarzan being grabbed by one in Tarzan at the Earth's Core and being dropped into a nest of hungry babies. So it is a pretty standard danger. It's like captured by a pterodactyl. It must be Tuesday. It happens all the time.
Well, that Tarzan at the Earth's Core incident there you just described is one of my favorite scenes, and that's been captured several times by various artists. They've all done an extraordinary job with it. There's a lot of emotion, a lot of anxiety, a lot of danger, a lot of fear, and a lot of struggle there to depict. No matter how you look at it, and all those many fine artists. In fact, just yesterday I got a copy of one of the Frazetta drawings of that incident and added that to my wall here. But there's plenty of others. Neil Adams, Joe Jusko, of course. There's a long list, all fine artwork. A very perilous moment. I would not want to be in that position, hanging by the claws of a pterodactyl way up in the air, going off to be fed to somebody's dinner.
Yeah, one of the animated cartoons we did commentary for a few episodes back had that scene in it where Tarzan was snatched by the pterodactyl. So also shown to us by Filmation. So
exactly. Now, one of these days, I think we should for our podcast store, we should create a T-shirt that says something like "What would Tarzan do?" and then put that down on the T-shirt. How do you handle this situation? It may be akin to some of the things you face in your everyday life, so to speak, metaphorically. So it's just food for thought. What would Tarzan do? Well, Every time I read Tarzan at their score, he manages to get out of that scrape, but he has a time of it. Where
Make it
am I?
right by saying, what would new do?
What would New do?
What would New
Well,
do? That's good.
That's good too. That's got possibilities.
Yeah.
Where am I? I'm on chapter 7, Beast Fires. That sounds right.
I believe so, yes.
All right, well, that's where I'm going to pick it up here. All right, so we're in part 2, as we've already established, chapter 7, Beast Fires. So we've described Nat Oll's troubles over here. A tour carries Nat Oll to his canoe. He is a boat builder, we know, so he's got that shiny new boat. He also finds Nu's boat besides his own boat, so he learns he is pursued by Nu. So he can't have that. So Tour throws Nat Oll into one boat and shoves the other boat, that would be Nu's boat, out into the surf. And let me note that this is Nu the son. Nu the dad will pop up here later on. Nu sees all this. He dives into the sea and overtakes Tour's boat. Unable to fight, both Nat Oll and Nu, they're on board the boat now. Tour knocks Nat Oll out with a fist. He's a brutal guy. He knocks Nat Oll out with his fist and batters Nu with the paddle until Nu slips back into the water. So things aren't looking good. Let me note that Tour, yeah, I did want to note this, that Tour is very violent towards Nat Oll as well as towards other women. And we'll hear more about that later on. And Nat Oll, later on, wakes up at night bound hand and foot. She's in a hut that belongs to Tour, the boat builder. He has more than one hut, so Tour is a hut builder too. I drew that conclusion here. No word on where Nu, son of Nu, is. The village, this is nighttime now, the village is surrounded by beast fires to keep the carnivores at bay, but a lion leaps into the camp. Lions will do that. We've seen that happen in the Tarzan books. So a lion leaps into the camp in the darkness, seizing an old man. The lion is slain along with the old man before it can escape. So after all this excitement, everyone goes to sleep except for two girls who are left to wait to tend the fires and to watch for other leaping lions. Tour enters the hut and starts to untie Nat Oll's legs. Now Nat Oll watches as yet another creature enters the dark hut and silently attacks Tour. Gee, I wonder who that could be. With her legs freed, Nat Oll takes this opportunity to run into the jungle. That concludes chapter 7, the beast fires. So Nat Oll gets away, goes into the jungle. Meanwhile, Tour is being attacked in his own hut. And any comments or thoughts from you all?
Yeah, I think it is important to note that Tour is very violent towards the women in his life, which is a good way of setting up what we'll later see with his regular mate, Throck, and which will have very important consequences to the story. So it's kind of like last episode, we mentioned how Burroughs gradually built up Curtis's character to hint that he was kind of a jerk until we found out he actually was. It was a very good bit of characterization. He's doing something similar here, paralleling that with Tour, gradually hinting that he is not very nice towards women and having that have serious consequences towards the end of the story.
Mm-hmm. Well said. And in fact, this reminds me, it was just today in my Facebook discussion group, The Love of All Things Edgar Rice Burroughs, I was commenting that Burroughs heroes treat their women very well. They're always good to them. Don't mistreat them. So seeing someone here in a Burroughs story mistreat a woman repeatedly tells us pretty quick that he's a villain and has a bad moral character or poor moral character. Any other comments from you all?
Oh, we have to give Nat Oll credit for doing the best she can and helping to fight for Nu while in the canoe. She's not just a helpless damsel in distress. She'll take a hand when she can.
Another trademark of a Burroughs heroine, they can stand up for themselves. All right, moving now into chapter 8, Bound to the Stake. Nu is left stunned but does not drown. This is when back in the water incident. So when Nu is hit there by Tour, he's left stunned but does not drown and is able to swim ashore to the island. Nu sees where Tour lands on the opposite shore, so Nu's got to figure out a way to get over there. Nu finds his canoe and rows after the other boat. So night falls. Nu sees the beast fires and lands north of the camp. So Nu has finally made his way to that same shoreline. During the incident where the lion seizes the old man and is killed, which I described earlier, During that time, where the lion seizes the old man, Nu creeps into camp from the opposite side under the cover of darkness. Prowling the camp, Nu hears Nat-Ul talking to another in one of the huts and creeps inside. So Nu, as we might have thought, was indeed that third person that came into the hut right behind Tur. Nu leaps on Tur, who calls out for help when Nu gains the upper hand. Now, groan or Gron, and I think probably a lot of people groan when they see this person. But most likely, Gron, most likely is pronounced Gron. It may come out groan or Gron. That's who I'm talking about. She's Tur's mate, and you really can't say much good about her either. She leads villagers to the hut where Nat-Ul is bound, knowing that her mate Tur would be with a captive woman. Now, seems the thing I don't understand here. I would expect Gron to be mad at Tur for being with another woman he's holding prisoner, but Gron doesn't seem to be upset by that. In my opinion, Tur would get what he would deserve if indeed she were upset, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So she knows Tur's in there with a captive woman. She directs other villagers to that hut. When a carelessly thrown torch starts the hut burning, it must have been a smoker. When a carelessly thrown torch starts the hut burning, Nu is revealed, and he is quickly captured. And I think we've said that Nat-Ul escapes during all this. So, yes, the men go to search for Nat-Ul, who made her way out the back door of the hut, and Gron, G-R-O-N, Gron, or Groan, attacks Nu. It seems, here we go. This is my note. It seems to me that Gron should be mad at her mate Tur for abducting another woman. We've already covered that. One of the men stops Gron and tells Tur to punish his woman for interfering with the affairs of the men. Well, Tur doesn't miss an opportunity to beat his woman seriously, so he takes her away and beats her. As stated here, more violence from Tur towards women. The chief questions Nu, who calls the boat builders cowards because they wear the skin of cows, not wild beasts taken in the hut. Well, I admire Nu for his bravery, but this does not work out very well for him. This is not how to win friends and influence people when you're insulting them. Angered, the boat builders wait a day, then they tie Nu to a stake surrounded by a ring of wood and light the fire to roast him alive. So Nu's up if he's not up a creek, he's up a stake, and he's getting a hot foot as we leave this chapter. Any comments here on chapter 8?
It's kind of interesting that Nu and Nat-Ul were a few chapters ago, they had slept in different caves near each other without realizing and missed a chance to get together. Here, Nat-Ul does not realize that it's Nu who's attacking Tur and runs away. So once again, they were right next to each other and didn't realize it and missed a chance to reconnect. So they seem to have really bad luck in that regard.
Well, I can see her desire to get the heck out of that hut. I can understand that. But GL, who else would be crawling in there under the cover of darkness into that hut? You have to have one in hindsight.
I think it is important to note that Nu is disgusted by the boat builders' willingness to beat women. It does show a difference in moral development between the two civilizations.
Very good.
It's also clear that Nu's tribe does not torture prisoners. They might kill prisoners because they can be ruthless towards their enemies, but he's only vaguely familiar with the concept of torture. So it's clear that his tribe doesn't beat women and doesn't torture people. And so Burroughs is careful to establish the difference between Nu and his culture and the boat builders and their more brutal culture. So also, it's kind of neat. It's kind of interesting that Nu doesn't think much of manual labor. I made a note of a quote from this chapter. Nu despised them, talking about the boat builders, not because they would kill him, for he might expect that from any stranger, but because they wore the skin of cows and the men labored instead of devoting all their time and energies to the chase and to warfare. So that's more of a cultural than a moral difference, but I just thought it was kind of neat that from Nu's point of view, anybody who worked at manual labor was kind of wimpy because they're not out hunting cave bears. So just like a difference in the two cultures. These guys are actually never going to get along. In so many aspects, they are just diametrically different from each other.
That's a very good point. I didn't really pick up on that so much, but I can certainly see what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And that explains news commentary there. That like I said, that's not how you win friends and influence people.
Mm-hmm.
And it winds up a takeover. But he's expressing his belief and his outlook on life there.
Yeah. It's another thing. If New had become a regular character in stories set in the 20th century with Victoria, that attitude might have been fodder for some stories. Victoria.
Yeah, I can see him with a construction worker. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Anything else? That's good commentary. Anything else?
I think that's it.
All right, then I'm going to push on. Okay, we're still in part 2, which will be here for the remainder of this podcast. Chapter 9, The Fight. As if we haven't already had enough violence, now we have a chapter entitled The Fight. Well, this chapter opens up with all the members of New's tribe. We're shifting locales again. This chapter opens up with all the members of New's tribe sitting in silence, reflecting on the absence of New, the son, and their beloved Nat-ul. Hud is looked down upon for his role in the day's events that led to the disappearance of New, the son, and Nat-ul. So there's some sadness here. There's some blame directed, deservedly so, directed towards Hud, and fear is what's become of New and Nat-ul. Now, the head of the tribe is Nu, the father of Nu, who I shall refer to as Nu, the father, just to keep things simple and I hope clear. Nu, the father, states that he cannot look for a new home with 2 of the tribe's children missing, because Nat-ul and Nu, the son, their whereabouts are still unknown, could be lost, we just don't know that for sure. Hud is deservedly catching the blame for all this. No one is missing or mourning Hud. Roster, anyone taking notes at home here? We got some new people introduced. Dag, a young friend of Nu the son, draws a line in the ground and swears never to cross it until Nu the son is found. Very symbolic, a very bold statement, I might add, from this young man who has great potential, I would say, to be a leader. Dag is joined by Ott, A-H-T. Tim, I think you mentioned him earlier. Ott, A-H-T, is Nu's brother, and then joining Ott and Dag at this line is Nu the father, then Tha, who is Nat-ul's father. So this line is getting crowded. Ott joins Dag, followed by Nu himself. That would be Nu the father. And then Tha. Soon everybody is south of the line. I may have repeated some people there, but as I can say, they're all falling into line. From this, Nu the father forms a rescue party with the remainder of the tribe is slowly returned to their former home. Take their time getting there until we figure out where these missing people are. So the rescue party finds the dead body of Hud. So he got what he was deserving. They do find traces of both Nu and Nat-ul, but no indication that Nu is caught up with Nat-ul. Another case perhaps where their paths cross without them realizing it. The rescue party, in order, I guess, to conduct a better search, the rescue party splits into 3 smaller parties. I hope you're still taking notes. Nu, the father, is in one rescue party with Dag, will lead a party to follow the beach. Tha and Ott is Nu's brother, and Tha is Nat-ul's father. They're going to lead a second rescue party that will head inland a mile, then turn south. And the third party will go west. That night, Dag, who is with Nu's party, sees those beast fires we've been talking about from previous chapter. He also sees Nat-ul creeping up on their very own camp. So she's going to allow them to rescue her. Just happened to come into their camp. But nothing's easy. Nat-ul is being stalked by Zor the lion and the lion's mate. So this is 2 lions for the price of 1 here. But fortunately, Dag and the others kill the lions. Now, this is a good sequence here. So I've got an excerpt here that I'm going to read, because as I often say, Burroughs will tell it much better than I, and this certainly deserves the attention. So Dag and the others kill the lions, and this is Burroughs describing how it happens. So begin excerpt. And then with a frightful roar, Zor charged, and the creature before it rose upon 2 full feet and the light of the nearer blaze. With a cry that aroused the whole camp, Dag leaped beyond the flaming circle, his spear hand thrown back, the stone head laboriously chipped to a sharp point directed at the charging Zor the lion. The weapon passed scarce a hand's breadth from the shoulder of Zora's prey, that would be Nadol, and buried itself in the breast of the beast. And at the same instant, Dag leaped past the fugitive, placing himself directly in the path of the lion, with only an axe and a knife of stone to combat the fury of the raging, wounded demon of destruction. "Run within the beast, Nadol," he cried. "Zora's mate is coming to his aid." And sure enough, springing lightly across the sands came a fierce lioness, maned like her lord. The other warrior met the charge of the infuriated lioness with his spear. Straight into the broad breast ran the sharp point, the while the man clung tenaciously to the haft, whipped hither and thither as the beast reared and wheeled and struck at him with her paws. Now Nu, this is the chief, and his fellows arrived upon the scene. A score of spears bristled from the bodies of Zora and his mate. Axes fell upon their heads, and Nu the mighty leaped upon Zora's back with only a stone knife. There he clung to the thick mane, driving the puny weapon time and again, and the back and side until at last the roaring, screaming beast rolled over upon its side to rise no more. The lioness proved more tenacious of life than her lord, and though bristling with spears and cut to ribbons with the knives of her antagonists, she charged in close quarters with a sudden rush that found one of the cavemen a fraction of a second too slow. The strong claws raked him from neck to groin, and as he fell, the mighty jaws closed with a sickening crunch upon his skull. And within the circle of fires, Nadol replenished the blaze, keeping the whole scene brilliantly lighted for the warriors. That she had stumbled upon men of her very own tribe so unexpectedly seemed little short of miraculous, a happy coincidence, says in the Burroughs books. She could scarce wait for the battle. So urgent was the business that filled her thoughts. End of that passage, and I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. That's Burroughs describing the fight. So to wrap this chapter up, Nadol tells Nu the father of the events from Hud's kidnapping to her discovery that Nu the son was being burned at the stake. The rescue party attacks the camp, overcoming the boat builders, but finds that Nu, the son of Nu, has already disappeared from the camp. So that concludes my comments there for chapter 9. Any comments?
Go
Every
ahead.
time I kept seeing the name Dag, I started thinking of Dagar, the invincible gold key.
I remember that. So,
Oh, yeah.
that was a good comic. I do like that Nat knew the Older's plan, the dividing of the tribe into search parties to check out all the possibilities, was intelligent and well thought out of. It that plus Nu's loyalty and not leaving his son behind and inspiring everybody else in the tribe to do the same. He's demonstrating himself to be a really good leader, and that was a cool fight scene. Now, I noticed they call the lion Zor. That means that though they speak Mangani, their own language is a different one. Otherwise, they'd be saying Numa.
Good point.
Mhm.
I picked up on that too.
Mhm.
Any other comments?
That was all I had.
Well, I agree with you. These cavemen are much more advanced than what I expected at first. They do show potential.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So if nothing else there, chapter 10 is entitled Groan's Revenge. So we'll get back to her. The women of the boat builders taunt Groan until she is beside herself with rage. Now, this is Tur's mate that we're talking about. Scarb, the chief who ordered her beating, says Tur will find another woman and throw Gran out of his hut. So when Gran asks Tur for forgiveness, he knocks her down, orders her to get away from him. She goes mad, since she already has anger management problems. Now she's mad. Vowing revenge on Tur, this is terrible, but it happens here. Vowing revenge on Tur, she slays her own son because it was Tur's beloved child. Commentary for me here. Obviously, it's cruel and stupid to say the least, but it does show what she's about. She's willing to go that far. Then, beating out two of the beast fires, she shouts a false warning that 4 lions are in the village killing the children. While everyone races to save the children, Gran frees Nu and helps him steal a boat. Behind, and all this is out of spite. Behind them, they see two people set out after them, and behind them, this would be Gran and Nu. They see two people set out pursuing them in another canoe. Their pursuit follows them out to sea to one of the islands on the horizon. Landing there on that island, armed with only Gran's knife, they see the other boat approach. Nu and Gran head inland on that island, where Gran admits she did not save Nu for herself, but only to anger Tur, whom she hates. And actually, if I was son of Nu there, I'd be relieved that Gran is not interested in me, because she's not the kind of person I want to be around.
Mm-hmm.
And that concludes my comments here for chapter 10. You all have anything to say?
Yeah, the death of the baby, he's not graphic about it at all, but it is a truly horrific moment, as it should be. Burroughs handles telling that very well. And I think he's also... Oh, sorry, Scott, go ahead.
Well, I just saying, but it's a frightening moment. It's horrible, yeah.
Yeah. I think Burroughs is also showing us a practical as well as a moral reason not to beat women, because Gran here is driven to take revenge, and it's not going to work out well for Tur in the end. So, don't beat women because it's a despicably immoral thing to do, but also don't beat them because it could come back to bite you in the end. So, and I just like, is there a direct comparison in there? A Nu being on the island without weapons being compared to a modern person being in public naked? I made a note of that, but I didn't make a note whether it was taken directly from the book. But that's just Burroughs is stressing primitive man's self-reliance, which is a common theme for him, especially in the Tarzan novels. Those of us from civilization could be thrown into the wilderness and we'd be dead in a day because we would have no idea what to do. Whereas these guys we think of as less evolved than us would live and thrive in that same situation.
Well, certainly being stuck on this island while being pursued by others, and your only companion is this grown person, that's not who I want at my side. One, you can't trust her. Two, she is not of any kind of good moral character, not anybody that I'd want to be around long term. So I would want to distance myself. I mean, she may be able to fight, I'll give her that, but she could just as easily turn on me on a whim and may join those people pursuing. So I'd want to distance myself from her just as quickly as possible. Yeah.
We also keep seeing something Burroughs is doing a lot in this book is coming up at a cliffhanger moment, like, Nu has disappeared from the fire. Where is he? Or earlier in the novel where Nadel's tracks just disappeared when she was running off the beach and Nu had no idea what to doing. Stopping with those cliffhanger moments and then going back to a flashback in the next chapter to show us how we got to that point. And I think Burroughs does an excellent job of keeping the chronology straight, so that in the end it all makes sense in terms of how much time has passed and with the characters interacting with each other.
Setting up a situation, leaving you to wonder, and then going back later on and filling in those holes.
Yep, and he does that several times in this book, and it's a very effective narrative technique, and he does it very well.
If memory serves, now this is one of the, I don't want to say one of the first books, but it's pretty high on the list in timeline as to books he's written. So I believe he took that approach pretty effectively over in the Barsoom books. Does that sound familiar?
I think he did after the first three, and they weren't necessarily narrated in the first person anymore.
Right.
I think he often did the same thing.
I'm thinking specifically of Swords of Mars, and I'd have to look at. But yeah, definitely after the first three is where I was thinking. But you're right. I distinctly recall as a youngster reading these stories for the first time, and I'm wondering, gee whiz, what happened here? I hope he tells us, and he would. And I recall finding a sense of relief that he goes back and fills in those gaps for me.
Yep. I also think a point related to what I'm discussing here about Burroughs' take, a lot of people think because he's dealing with prehistoric beings or people like Tarzan in the woods, animalistic type people, that he would be like a promoter of might makes right. But that's completely opposite of what he really says. He might can help make right, but it doesn't guarantee that it is going to be right. He brings that nuance in on characters, as we're talking about how to treat women, how to treat animals. Some things are necessary to stay alive. Sometimes you have to kill an animal to eat it, but you don't necessarily kill an animal for enjoyment.
Yeah,
It's he has a subtlety to it.
there
That's a
is.
good point.
It's not might makes right. It's might in defense of right. If
Yes.
you're able to fight in defense of those who need it, then you are responsible for doing so, and it's a responsibility that the heroes of the Burroughs universe feel very strongly. We see that with has this sense of honor, personal honor, to become Gron's protector in these last few chapters, even though he has no reason to like her or admire her. It's might in defense of right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Scott, you were going to take over with chapter 11.
Yep, 11 through 15, I believe it is. So it'll be the ending of both parts and this section, of course. So chapter 11 is called the Oryx. Oryx, does that sound right to you? Oryx?
I think that's how you say it. It's a word I've seen written a million times. I don't know if I've ever heard it pronounced out loud.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a reason to miss it out loud either till tonight.
Here's your chance to be creative.
So now that New and Grown are back together, or after he's been cut loose there, they go off to hide in the forest, and he has her come up into a tree with him. The background of his people is when they're hunting or in a place they consider a danger, that they have learned how to nestle up and sleep on the branches up on the tree there. And so they fall asleep, and when she wakes up in the morning, I think she's slightly startled because he's got an arm around her, but I think it's more for like protection and holding her up there. She finds comfort in it, like a husband and a wife in bed together or wrapped around each other. And she's looking at his face and deciding that he's handsome and likes that. Then the last 24, 48 hours will start coming in back to her. And she starts remembering that she killed her baby. So I think she was truly that was like a moment or a cycle of insanity. It was sad at that time, the way her husband treated her and knocked her down and the anger that came back. So it definitely, obviously, would be to most of us not a rational move on anybody's part, on her part, to kill her child or the child of her husband like that. So I think when it comes back, I think it affects her in a different way now than before. Any comments on that?
No, I agree. I think she is showing remorse, and then not that excuse that doesn't excuse what she does as well. And I think Burroughs realizes that because she does pay for her crime in the end, in a sense.
Yeah.
But she's a very human character. She was without excusing it or taking away her moral responsibility. She was driven to it by the abuse she took from Tour, and I think it's quite appropriate to feel some sympathy for her, even though that she committed a horrible crime.
Yeah. Jess, anything?
No, I think it's a good point you've made there. I think probably I can give her some sympathy, but I still can't forget what she did.
Mm-hmm.
No, exactly. A character like this shows up sometimes in screenplays and movie scripts nowadays. You hear the critics going like, "Look how multi-layered this character is and how much work they put into it." And other authors have done it too. Victor Hugo, Les Mis, stuff like that. But here, 100+ years ago, Burroughs is writing this story, the depth to the character here is very well done.
It's a nice balance. You do feel sympathy with her, but you know she still has a moral responsibility for the crime.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I certainly believe in the notion of forgiveness, and I know I value forgiveness when I've screwed up seriously, but she's made a major mistake though in killing a child.
Yeah.
That's one for the court system to, if there were a court system, to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, they went on from there. They go out, going to try and get some stuff to defend themselves with or fight with, make some weapons, get stones, probably sharpen them up. And New helps going down these cliffs with the rocks and all that, and kind of admires her. I don't think he knows anything about her baby at this time, but admires her tenacity or try to stay with them as they're going down this cliff. I believe there was, I know we'll probably come up to a little bit of it, but wasn't there also an area earlier where he realized that a lot of the other tribes or different tribes, men or whatever you want to call them, had difficulty climbing up cliffs or up on the rocks.
Yeah,
that's a skill he's learned with his people.
And that helps him out a lot in these last few chapters, that he can climb and nobody else he runs into can.
So after they're doing this part up and down the cliff like that, they see some cattle, which is where the name Auric comes from. Auric means like ancient, not ancient, but prehistoric or primitive cattle compared to what we're used to. And so New's going to try and kill one or two to get them some food, but they also see the cattle owners, the herders, coming out with them too from the trees there. So they get up onto a ledge, hide up there, and watch what's going out during this time. During this time too, Grana is thinking about how appreciative, how much she likes New, and is thinking of him being her mate. And while she's thinking this, New is still concerned about Natal taking Natal rescuing her or finding her so that they can be back together. And then during this time, they wait and the herders leave, and New gives her some weapons like a knife or a spear so she can do some hunting and get some food for herself or for them. And he's going to follow and see where the herders go and what they might be able to get from them if he can steal some weapons or what he comes across. What he comes across on is a lake, and they have created, I'm going to guess, man-made islands like there's a people down like in Peru and some places where they've done that, created out of the reeds or straw islands that they actually stay on or live on and fish off of, and they have little huts here. Burroughs calls them caves because that's the only way New can think of them as caves, even if they're little huts on these floating islands out there. I thought that was cool. I know, like I said, there's places in Peru and a few places that have people doing that. But I thought it was really cool to have him bring that in as their type of place. Normally with the cattle and stuff, you'd think it's going to be someplace fenced in or maybe a walled fortress of some sort. So I'm not, so they kind of let, I guess, cattle are out in the woods there, wherever they let them pasture, and they're living out for protection off the land on the water and reeds. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a neat piece of world building. Each of the three tribes we meet in this News tribe and the boat builders and then these guys all have their own personality to them in terms of the way that their culture has developed.
Yes. Yeah. So he goes, is watching them and hiding, walking around, and during this time realizes that he's becoming prey for a large wild cat, tiger, panther, whatever you want to refer to it as. So he's aware of that's out there too, but meantime he's trying to figure out how or what he should do to get out on some of these reeds and or huts, and maybe get some supplies or weapons. And he sees one sentry come out, standing watch, because they have like little walkways from the land and out to these islands that are connected this way. And he's staying right alongside the water, and also apparently a girlfriend or a wife, someone very close to the sentry, comes by, and they're kind of hugging and talking a bit. And just as the cat, he realizes the cat's behind him, is going to leap for him for a little supper. He dives into the water. It's shallow water, but dives there and tries to get in where he can swim a ways, and maybe I'm picturing him going under one of the walkways, so he's hidden, but he's watching the sentry with his lady friend there talking, and he spends about an hour wishing they would quit, and they're talking and hugging and kissing. Finally, the lady leaves, and he starts to pull himself up and crawl behind, get up on the surface of these walkways, goes through some huts, finds a couple of supplies or weapons there to find, and then comes up behind the sentry. First, it's interesting because he's thinking of a way. Should he go back in the water? He's trying to think of a way to get to land safely, and it's but to do it quietly and safely without hurting the sentry. But he can't think of a better way of doing it. So he jumps up behind him and ends up, when the sentry's grabbing a knife, the way he's holding and hugging him helps the sentry stab himself, the sentry self, through his heart there. And then he continues to go on and return back to ground. But I thought it was interesting that it doesn't say he's concerned about his life, but that Burroughs writes about he's looking at one way maybe to get back, another way safely. His first instinct isn't, okay, I got to kill this guy to get away. So that ethical part, that morality part that he carries, we talked about earlier, I think shows itself here.
Yeah, New has a very strong moral sense. It's definitely different from our moral sense, though. New is from a world where if you're from a different tribe, you are an enemy. And so
yes,
when he has to kill the sentry, he doesn't go out of his way to kill the sentry, but when he has to, he does it without a second thought, because anybody from a different tribe is by definition an enemy. Something else that might have been an interesting plot device if we had ended up with New in the 20th century adventures. Yeah, and I actually felt a little bad for that sentry. We'd gotten a very human moment with him, like with his girlfriend there on the causeway, and then he ends up dead. So I felt bad. Burroughs may have done that on purpose, but I felt bad for that sentry. So
I think he did. I think the part he didn't, he wasn't like hitting it right on the nose by saying anything, but the fact that he had a thought about different ways to try and escape. But then it came to a point, his best part of survival was to kill him. But it was you're right, it's a very interesting turn there, because he was just a guy out on watch, his girlfriend, whoever came by, and he hadn't done anything to him or discovered him or anything like that. So it shows an interesting balance there in survival and completing the job.
yeah, you can actually parallel that to the return in Tarzan, where Tarzan is stalking a Waziri warrior, going to kill him for his weapons, and then sees the guy bravely fight a lion, and he has this epiphany. Oh, wait a minute. This guy's a human just like me. I just can't kill him for no reason. He does not have the same epiphany. He's in a different situation. But it's an interesting parallel there.
It is. Oh, darn. Well, this is all going on then.
Yeah.
I'm
Jess,
sorry.
by the way, Jess, I don't know if you realize that your microphone is muted at the moment.
My microphone?
No, Jess's was. Yeah.
Thank you.
Jess
I was simply
muted
saying that the Century situation was a good compare, or the Wazari situation there was a good comparison. I think that's a good point that you made.
Thank you.
The and thanks for learning me about the microphone. The imagine the silence you could have had there for a while. Another thing, though, is we see that though on I'll say TV shows and movies too. Be it I don't want to pick on James Bond or the Wild Wild West, or Star Trek, but just name a few. There's a guard there just doing his job, minding his own business, and someone comes along. They might knock him out, or they might put a knife to him. A knockout is something presumably to recover from. Okay, but a knife in the throat, that's another deal. So I do think about that kind of thing. The guy's just doing his job. He hasn't hurt anybody, at least not yet. I mean, he might, given the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just something I've often wondered about. Go ahead.
Well, also too, the fact that they're herders, so that is a little more like an agricultural, self-maintaining thing, as opposed to just straight out hunters or raiding other villages too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's an implication these guys are not as violent as the boat builders have shown themselves to be.
Yeah. So then it jumps and we leave Newport a little while and go back to where a couple chapters before he was in the village. That Natal is going through the village looking for him when see if he's hiding somewhere in there after he had been let loose and able to escape.
Yeah, back on the mainland is where we are.
Yeah, back at that village. Yeah, mm-hmm. And she's going through trying to see if she can find him, and Tur is there and kind of hides himself in shadows or in a hut so she doesn't recognize or see him, and acts like, a friend to her says, I know where he's at, I can take you to him. And he kind of keeps his head hidden, and she says okay and goes with him, and he gets one of those boats people, one of the boats, gets her in there, and they are managed to escape through there and go by one village with the boats and not be detected. And she realizes that this one point that they're not going in the direction she believes they should be going to. And he instead takes her to an isolated area on another island and tries to have his way with her. But she's got a nice hard paddle and knocks him out and takes off into the forest. And after a while, he recovers from being knocked out and gets up, still a little dazed, thinks he sees her and goes up to try and catch her, and finds out what he saw was moving in with golden hair as a lion, instead feasting on something else, which really scares him. And he goes back and finds a tree to climb and get way up there and hang on to the cord night and hope the lion doesn't find him. Mm-hmm. And that brings us to the end of chapter 12.
Yeah, I have to say that New the Elder back on the mainland, he is obviously an intelligent man and a good leader, but he made a tactical error there after they had attacked and defeated the boat people of leaving Nat El alone in the village when they hadn't made sure the village was completely secure. So if he had just left, okay, you want to stay here and look for New, that's fine. I'll leave a couple of guys with you. But he misses a bet on that one, and so that gets Nat El and Tur together again.
Exactly. And so chapter 13, the title of that is Natul is heartbroken, and she has not stopped while the other guys climb the tree. She keeps on going through the forest, trying to make her way through the island. Nightfall comes, and she wants to just stop and rest for a bit up on a cliff. There's another large animal out in the dark that she wants to escape from, make sure she doesn't become a meal instead, and continues moving on, finds a cave to sleep in. This is funny because now this cave turns out to be next to the cave where New and Grown are now staying.
This is like the third time they're right next to each other without realizing it.
Yeah. Didn't we run into this earlier in the story?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Burroughs has got to be doing this on purpose, just playing on some irony here.
He is known for coincidences.
Yeah.
She wakes up and sees New returning, and he's met by Grown, who is, I'll just say, oh, lovey-dovey now, or she's happy he's safe, and she's thinking of him as, now being her mate, and she sees this, and New Tal just, her temper, jealousy factor goes way up. Totally ticked off like that, and then and she wants to kill him. That rages in her, but she decides to take off and hide out or go back in the forest. And there she runs into more of the Aurochs, the cattle down there, and so she can't go the way he originally wanted to go. Meantime, New is telling Grown that he loves New Tal, that's who he needs to find and bring her back, and he can't be Grown's mate there. And she doesn't take that well, is crying, and then falls down to the ground. And then he steps out of the cave and sees this person out by the cattle there, but you can see well enough that's a woman, not a man. And he starts heading down in that direction and starts thinking, oh, that might be Natal herself. And he, as he's making his way down the cliff in the meadow there, the herders show up and they grab her, and she gets captured for is the 6th or 7th time anyway. back to the lake dwellings, back to islands where they're at, and he just heads out, ignoring everything else, and takes off to follow them back to the lake. And that's chapter 13. Not a ton of things happening there, but it keeps the story moving. It's a shorter chapter.
Yeah, and I realized not all misunderstood the situation. She thought that New was willingly kissing Gron, and so I get that. But you're in a mind-numbingly dangerous situation. It's not a best time to throw a jealous fit. It's really not. So
if Natal knew Gron like we know Gron, we would know that New is not going to carry on with that.
Mm-hmm.
But
if you knew Gron like I knew Gron. No.
Another lesson to be learned of those is to get to know your neighbors. When you're staying in a cave or a hut or wherever, always find out who's next door to you. It might be somebody you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So going on to chapter 14, the title of which is "I Have Come to Save You," and now New has followed them, and he's waiting till it's dark so he can sneak around into the islands, the village, however you want to call it, under the cover of the dark, of course. And he goes through buildings and by them. And now he's doing again like we talked about earlier in the story about the smelling or sniffing out to try and pick up that scent. Again, a device that's used a lot in the Burroughs story, but it's good to see him using that here to see if he can pick her up out of the building instead of, ducking the head in and ducking the head out. It makes a lot of sense for him to do that. And then when he's by one building, he sees a sentry go into one of the huts and wakes somebody up, and that person's name is Throck, who's supposed to take that watch as a guard. And guy's about half asleep and he doesn't want to get up. And when the other sentry leaves after telling him it's time, New goes up there and keeps himself kind of hidden in shadows and say, hey, I'll take this watch. Don't worry about it. It's weird. I'm trying to think how they do. Each of them knows the same language like this, but did I miss that somewhere earlier about him?
I think they've established what they did with News Tribe and the Boat Builders earlier, that at this point humanity has a common language.
Okay, that's where I couldn't remember if there's something extra on that or what, but
Burroughs doesn't go in. Yeah, he doesn't go into it in detail, but I think it's implied that at this point, there hasn't been any language drift yet.
Yeah, I think I just didn't know if there's something specific about this tribe or not that I missed or read past on. So anyway, he New tells him, go ahead and sleep. I'll take the watch because I've got a girlfriend coming by who's promised to see me on the watch. And also tells Throck, give me your robe or whatever to wear so people think it's me out there. And so he goes back and out to the watch. And after a while, the curiosity for New is like, it's going to take too long to figure out where Atoll is. So he goes back and the Throck goes, so, hey, by the way, where's that new female prisoner? He goes, oh, she's, down at the end of that other hut. He's like, okay. Mm-hmm. And so he goes there and Throck starts thinking about him, goes, that's kind of weird. Why is he asking that? He goes, if something's going on and I'm found out not to be on watch, I'm going to get killed. So he goes out and to see what's going on and heads down to the jail hut, however you want to call it, the cell, and finds Null and New and Nuttall there. But New kills Throck, and both Nuttall and New dive in the water and swim ashore and are able to outrun anyone who's chasing them there. So the group of people that got together lose them in the darkness and in the woods there. And then they climb up, hit the cliff, an area where the caves are and stuff like that. And Tur is up there. So he wants to push this boulder down, so he'll go down and kill them in a landslide or just by the size of that boulder. And as he's doing that, Groan comes out and sees what's happening. And regardless of their heated argument a couple hours before, she's still carrying that love for New in her heart instead of Tur. So she kills him before he can drop the rock on them and then kills herself in the meantime. And maybe part of that's because of, having killed her son earlier instead of living with that, knowing she couldn't live with New. Mm-hmm. And then the couple, Nuttall and New, find a couple of the canoes to dug out boats, and they head back to that village area where they were earlier, and they go back there, and she gives them a little hard time about it. I thought, you love me, you're going to bring me the head of Wu. Teases them a little bit about that. And, while they're back at the village now, I think they're still the only ones at the village. There's an earthquake, and the mountains and rocks all seem a world-type earthquake, and water from the sea is lifted up and starts washing in through the valley and over the land to flood everything. That's the end of chapter 14.
Yeah. And I just will say, we've talked about how strong Gron's character arc is already. I just want to reemphasize that. Everything that happens up to her killing Tur and then killing herself, it has a real sense of tragedy to it, and it hits all the right emotional notes. And yes. You do feel bad for Gron, but you also realize that her death is an appropriate moral consequence for killing her baby earlier.
Yeah, that's just sort of like Oedipus could be easily a story about her and covering that whole arc, and it'd be a very viable tragedy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the last chapter, number 15, it's called "What the Cave Reviewed." Now, we've ended with what looks like the end of the world as they know it there, and we come to a chapter like how are they going to survive. Alas, we are in our present time. They're in the residence, the plantation ranch of Tarzan, of Lord Greystoke in modern day, or their modern day Africa. When Victoria wakes up now, Victoria, who has been Natal throughout this whole second part, and her brother Barney's there, and said she'd been unconscious passed out because there's a small earthquake scared her and she fainted. Been out about 3 minutes or so, not too long. And she tells him about this, that in that 3 minutes, this whole lifetime story, basically, that she assumes dreamt it, that she dreamt it there, and details of it, and everything that happened, and he's like, well, you're okay here, and we haven't had a flood, it's a small earthquake. Curtis, as opposed to being dead villain previously, is still alive, but she believes the dream has warned her and told her not to. He isn't a person for her.
Yeah.
There's more in her life for her after that.
Did
you want to say something?
Oh, I just think we should make it absolutely clear that she's waking up at the beginning, after the earthquake in chapter 2 of part 1. So
yeah,
both the events of part 1 and all of part 2 are now coming as a dream she had.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for that part. So that's where the 3 minutes was in that whole encompassing. Yeah. Well, so then she, like the next day, her and her brother head out for a horse ride out across the I can't remember the name for the big plains out in Africa, but out like horse riding anyway, out in the open.
Mm-hmm.
And pardon?
The Veld.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And Barney's kind of surprised because she's going in an area she didn't like, where the cliffs are and the rocks, and because of the earthquakes and possibilities like that. But she rides right up to the cliffs and heads up, and he follows her up the cliff. She climbs over the rocks and gets up to the top, and they see that the cliff has actually opened up, that it wasn't all solid one piece. There's actually like a huge boulder that had been there, for all they know, for thousands of years, because they all thought it's part of the same mountaintop. And she's going in, and he's afraid of her, having a fit or seizure or whatever going in, because she's scared of dark caves, things like that. And but she goes in, and he follows her in there, and then inside they find the saber-toothed skull laying there, and next to it is the skeleton of Nu, who she takes to heart as having killed the saber-tooth, because he was going to prove his love for her, or for his love for Natal, who is her. So you get that mystery, Twilight Zone, time travel thing going on, and they're left standing there with the end of the story.
Yeah. Now I have, there is so at this point, everything that's happened of part 1 and part 2 is being presented as a dream. But we have proof here that Nu actually existed. So I have some theories. Part one of the book, where New is in the present, actually happened, but later events erased that timeline. Another idea is that part two did actually happen, and New's body in the cave is from when he goes out to hunt the tiger again at the end of chapter 14, and is apparently killed when the earthquake hits. So that theory has both of these actually happened, but somehow history was altered so that the timeline changed. Another idea is part one is just a dream, but Victoria was getting information from New from her memories as when she was not old. So her subconscious or her previous self is warning her about marrying Curtis. And if part one is just a dream, that might explain why Tarzan isn't up to snuff, since Victoria's subconscious didn't know enough about Tarzan to portray him properly.
Yes.
The last theory is that both parts are a vivid dream of Victoria, but she's still getting information from her Nat Ulk incarnation. I don't really like that one because I like to think of part two, at least, as definitely true history. But I guess the big thing is, did part one happen, but the timeline was changed, or was part one always just a dream? And I guess you can interpret it either way.
Yeah.
Which one would you guys pick?
Oh, I don't know. And just out of nowhere, I never thought of this reading the book.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're talking about the dream and the time conundrum and all that, I just remembered I've not seen a movie for years, but there's a Barbra Streisand movie, I think, On a Clear Day You Can See Forever, that dealt with her, as I remember, having dreams. And they're like something like this, like some kind of time travel dream or something, I think. Because I'll have to look that up, but just popped up into my head.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know what the options are here.
Yeah. I don't know. Jess, do you have a theory on it all? Whether it was a dream or really happened?
I would like to be able to talk with Barney. His take on this, because he might be able to tell us, based on the things that he did experience, as to what was real to him and what might have been a dream to Nat Ulk or Victoria.
Yeah.
Maybe he could tell you if you went on vacation with him.
I think I'll try to book that trip.
Yeah. Well, from Barney's point of view, you had the earthquake in part one, chapter 2, and Victoria fainted, and he carries her inside. She wakes up and says, "Oh, I had these dreams about New in our time, and then New back 100,000 years ago." So I don't know if Barney could add anything to this or what he would have thought once they found New's skeleton.
Well, but that's my point. Events like that, some of the events that Victoria experienced in her dreams, such as, let's say, the incident in the garden there and finding the spear and the blood spot and eventually finding New. Was that real or was that a dream? That's the thing I want to know.
Yeah. Well, if I think at this point, at the end of chapter 15, that didn't actually happen, because we flash back to a chapter before that where she's waking up from the faint. So it's weird. I mean, it's not dramatically unsatisfying. It's a great ending to the book, and it all works dramatically, but you can interpret it in different ways.
Yes.
And
that's part of the fun, is having this discussion right here, is what was real and what wasn't. This is not the first story that you walk out of saying, did that really happen, or how much that was imagined by the characters, and you're still not sure.
Yeah.
Here's another idea, piggybacking off of what you were just saying there, is maybe, let's say, part one is the dream, as you mentioned, one part, but now part two is not necessarily a dream or a flashback, but it's telling what really happened if she's reincarnated as Natal, And that earlier dream is what brought that history to surface, or maybe most of that part two, she didn't really dream, but Burroughs was fully in saying this was a real life, and that part one was the dream she had based because that's a real life. Am I getting too
No, I see what you're
convoluted
saying.
here?
Yeah, because another thing to think about is when Nat Ull wakes up from just a night's sleep at the beginning of chapter 2, she remembers the events as Victoria, but only as a dream. So if there's no literal time travel, is there time travel in terms of Victoria and Nat Ull sending their thoughts and memories to each other back and forth through time?
That's I guess
yeah.
that's why I was trying to say something along
Yeah.
those lines.
Yeah, which might make sense. That means that part one mostly was a dream, but part two is all true history that that Victoria was remembering from her previous life. So
yeah, I was wondering. Yeah,
yeah, I could accept that.
Mm-hmm.
Based on what we know, what we do know.
Yeah, but now it would have been much more straightforward if Burroughs had had a chance to make New a regular character. Then the second story would have just picked up with New and Victoria in the present, having another adventure in the present. Then it just would have been a case of she was still reincarnated from Nat Ull, but also just a case of suspended animation for 100,000 years, and then you've woken up again. So
and see that would make sense too for if the real events in part two, and basically the end of the world. You know, we've had cataclysmic events happen every 100 million years or whatever like that, where the mountains collapsed and the sea came in and flooded all of them. So that was the end of the story. But Nat Ull was down in the lowlands where the other people are and died that way, and he died up in the up in the cave at that same time because he was going up there to get the saber tooth head to prove his love to her, and he died there. And so that love through the ages, psychically or whatever, ended up coming back into her brain 100,000 years later.
So I wonder if you can say there's a theme in this book that things like heroism and love and self-sacrifice never die out, even if civilizations do.
Very well could be.
So,
and also I think he kind of wrote this on the fly, considering what we talked about before, that his publishers probably want him to do more Tarzan stuff, and maybe he'd start this story either as a sequel, but decide to wrap it up as a second part, making it a dream, but not clarifying a dream. I know he wasn't writing an episode of Dallas.
Where Bobby is in the shower saying, "Oh, I had a dream," or his wife had a dream, or whatever. I didn't watch Dallas, and even I know about that. That's famous.
Yeah, I didn't either, but I guess that they spent turned out, isn't it? The whole previous season, a whole year of the show turned out to be a dream when they opened up the next year. I hadn't watched show either, but that was big popular culture.
But in my opinion, though, to write off an entire season, one episode is bad enough, but to write off an entire season as a dream is a real cop-out by the writers. That's a lack of imagination and planning. In the case of Dallas, I know there were some complications there. I realize that. And in the case of this story, I'm certainly not criticizing Burroughs because it's being left open to our interpretation. In the case of Dallas, I think they just flat out told you it was a dream.
Yeah, they did. So Burroughs is being more subtle and letting us make up our own minds on it. So,
but I think them discovering the skeleton and the saber tooth up there in some way ties it in, like if in the Wizard of Oz at the end, when they're all gathered around Dorothy, oh, we're worried about you, Dorothy. And she goes, but I was here and there and all that. And if they looked down and saw she had ruby slippers on her feet.
Yeah.
They go up to the cave and they see New and the saber tooth. So somewhere somewhere reality with cosmic mystery crossed.
Yes, it does. And I think finding these skeletons, we can say for sure that part 2 has actually happened, that's a true history.
Yeah.
But to that point, the previous time when they were in that cave, we didn't see that saber-tooth skeleton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it appeared there since then.
Which means either part 1 was a dream or the timeline was altered somehow.
Uh-huh.
So I don't think I think those are the only two ways to explain it.
It's only two I can think of.
Yeah. But if we
take a
take part,
quantum leap in thinking on that.
yeah, if we take part 1 as a dream, then we have an excuse for why Tarzan wasn't up to snuff in part 1. So I kind of lean towards that for that reason.
I think it's
Yeah.
So,
Because she didn't know Tarzan that well, so she wouldn't know all the stuff. To her, he was more the civilized man that she saw for the short time.
yeah. So, okay. Well, that is our analysis of part 2 of the Eternal Savage. Before we move on, before I forget yet again, there is a particular resource we've been using regularly with this podcast, and it simply never occurred to us that we should be crediting this source every episode too. And so we're going to begin doing that now. It is the Erb Summary Project, which you can find online, where there are chapter by chapter summaries of all of Burroughs' novels. It's a great resource for us when we discuss these novels and we each take turns summarizing a chapter. I think there have been some times where one of us has just directly quoted from these summaries. So this was compiled, let's see, the one for the Eternal Lover, the summary there was summarized by James D. Bozarth with an introduction written for it by David Bruce Bozarth. And this was copyrighted in 2001, so they did this quite some time ago now, 20 years ago, but that information is still out there. It includes character lists, a list of settings, and all of that, as well as these truly valuable and concise summaries of each chapter. We have been using this on a regular basis, and I want to apologize for the fact that we just didn't think that we needed to be publicly crediting this wonderful source every time we made use of it. So that's the Erb Summary Project. It is available online, and if you're a Burroughs fan, it's something that's well worth checking out.
Absolutely.
erblist.com.
Mm-hmm. Yes, erblist.com. So, take a look at it. It's a great Edgar Rice Burroughs resource. And once again, our apologies to the creator of these summaries that we haven't been giving proper credit to it. It wasn't intentional. It was just an oversight. So that's that. I just appreciate everybody listening. Please email us at edgarsmailbag@gmail.com if you have any comments or questions, or leave a comment on any of the social media or podcast platforms where you find this podcast. We love hearing from our fans. And also take a look at our store at cafepress.com/ERB podcast. We have a lot of great products there. And we have, with the kind permission of Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated, this does include actual characters and creatures from the Edgar Rice Burroughs universe. I do want to mention specifically Woola, the Callet, who was John Carter's companion in the Barsoom novels. You can get yourself matching Woola drinking cups, one of which says Woola always loyal, and the other Woola always adorable. And that is true. He was both a loyal and adorable creature. So we will be highlighting that specific one in the show notes. But if you click on the link that will be provided, you will be able to find all sorts of products, including Tars Tarkas, a Griff, the Triceratops creatures from Tarzan the Terrible, or any number of other Edgar Rice Burroughs characters or situations. We will also have some products based on The Eternal Savage available in the store soon. So my name is Tim DeForest. Please check out my blog at Comics Old Time Radio and other cool stuff. You can find links to my books on Amazon there as well. Jess, is there anything you want to plug?
For the love of all things Edgar Rice Burroughs, Facebook discussion group, where we talk Edgar Rice Burroughs regularly and often, and would love to have you join us for the love of all things Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Mm-hmm. And Scott?
I'd just like to say hey to Jim and Harry, don't miss the next podcast because it'll be the Beasts of Tarzan.
Yeah, thank you for remembering that. I'd almost forgotten, so I appreciate it. So that is it for now, and we will be back again with another episode soon. Thank you all.